Hey, welcome to Sam Outside. I'm Sam and I'm outside. I've been waiting a month, waiting for this plant to finally come into bloom. And I'm sure it's not in complete bloom, but this is amazing. This is a pink lady slipper. The pink lady slipper is by far one of the most special plants I have the pleasure of viewing. It's not going to be in bloom for very long, but because it's in bloom, um, that's what makes it so special. This plant is a member of the orchid family, and it has very particular expectations or considerations in order for it to bloom to this maturity. This little flower can literally take up to 12 years waiting for the ideal conditions to get to this point. Now, we could see that the fronds could come out and they could be in a juvenile state for a while, but it does take a while for it to even bloom. It could take 12 years just to germinate. It needs a special relationship. First and foremost, the way it's designed has a 5% chance of a bee entering, getting trapped, collecting pollen, and then fighting its way out through this bulbous flower just to actually interact with the other pollinating components. The challenge is that there's actually no pollen in there, pardon me, nectar. There's pollen, but there's no nectar for the bees to feed off of. So there's a scent that attracts the bee. It comes in, finds one, doesn't find what it wants in terms of nectar. We'll go to another one and another one until it says, no, there's nothing in this for me. And then we'll soon lose, its whole intention for feeding itself. Meanwhile, it is collecting. So because there aren't so many things physically that can make its way into the flower, got to be the right size, the right kind of insect, and then collecting the pollen and interacting with the rest of the flower, it's not very successful. That's even if it gets this point. So in order to pollinate, it's a 5% chance. The reason it can take up to 12 years in order to actually germinate is because the conditions need to be right in the ground. This plant, the pink lady slipper, actually requires an interaction with the mitochondrial network, all right? The mycorrhizal network that's in the soil that is responsible for message relaying within all the other trees, more specifically the coniferous trees. They are responsible for actually feeding and nurturing the seeds once they're in the soil, that 5% chance of actually pollinating. That could take a very long time. Hey, buddy. Oh, he's so needy. All right, friends. The mycorrhizal network is responsible for sending messages, whether it's resources and hey, I need nitrogen. Oh, I'll do that. The mycorrhizal is a fungal network. That fungus never actually sees the light of day. So how can something grow that actually is not going to get its resources? So the fungus that's in the soil, that's a living part of all other vegetation, taxes those messages. So as they're relaying resources back and forth between different trees, other plant life, of which this is a member of, it will tax and take sugars. All right, so that's how the mycorrhizal network grows and is responsible in just the top 2 to 3 inches of the soil. The mycorrhizal relationship here with this lady slipper will require that it could spend some time, and when the mycorrhizal decide that there's enough resources, a surplus, it will actually allow the seed to germinate, giving it the fats and giving it the nutrients it needs to actually grow. The seeds are so small, they're incredibly small. A lot of the other plant life has a seed that will sustain that small plant through to maturity until it can start collecting its own resources. An acorn has, a fatty nut to sustain the germination process, as do, maple keys and a lot of other seeds. The seeds of this particular plant are so small, it's got nothing in it that will allow it to germinate. So it has to have the relationship there. However, once it gets to this stage and is actually collecting solar energy and actually creating sugars of its own, it will then be taxed. And that is part of the compensation. Very unique relationship, and it needs the perfect conditions. And that can take up to 12 years to get to this point. So this plant, this particular specimen is just literally an arm's reach away from my sit spot, my favorite spot to come and enjoy this part of the forest. There are many others that are, not mature enough, but there's one other specimen, if you don't mind, I want to take you to, because it's actually a pair of slippers. All right. So while I'm making my way over to that particular site, when this part of the world was first visited by Europeans, they often found plants that were growing on this land that were very similar and to plants they would have recognized back home. So we call it the pink lady slipper. But at one time in other places on this continent, it's known as American Valerian. Europeans would know Valerian as a plant similar to this, and they would use it as a sedative. All right, so they saw it, had something similar, but there is a pair of slippers just here. So it's pretty rare to have two stalks coming out of a pair of germinating plants. So I've been marking the pair so that I can share that with my friends and family as they walk through the forest. Not as easy to find, but what makes that pair so special is they actually help complete the story of this plant by the peoples who first lived on this land. The Ojibwe story is one of triumph and one of courage. The story is that there was an illness that went through a village. Everyone in the village was devastated by the sickness, including the local healer. So the one young lady, member of the community who had the strength to go out and find the cure, the plant that was needed, was sent into the forest to find it. They went very, very far in the worst possible conditions, in the snow. And as she was searching for this plant to cure everyone in the village, she lost her moccasins. And fighting to return in time with the cure, feet were incredibly ravaged by the terrible terrain and conditions and the ice and snow, that her feet began to bleed. And it's said that when she got back to her village, she provided the cure and saved her loved ones. To commemorate her courage and her commitment to the cure, to her village, it's said that in the spring, everywhere where her bloody footprints landed in the snow, popped up a pair of moccasins in the form of this flower. So in this part of the world, many people refer to it as the moccasin flower. So a couple stories, a couple renditions of what makes this flower so special. It's incredibly resilient, and for those people who are thinking that they want one in their own yard or in their own home, it is incredibly challenging to propagate and to uproot. In fact, it is protected in many places. So take a look at your local, state, or provincial statutes on what you're allowed to do, because this plant is protected. And in fact, because it needs such a specific type of soil in relationship with the mitochondrial network that's within the forest, only 5%, there's that number again, 5% of all plants ever harvested in the wild survive. All right, it needs a long time to grow, needs very specific conditions to even pollinate, and then it needs conditions to germinate. And it is part of the forest. So when you find it, enjoy it. It doesn't last that long. It's got an incredible story, and I'm not convinced I'm doing it justice, but there are a lot of other creators out there who can probably give you more information about the pink lady slipper. But it's one of my favorites, and I found one. I've been watching it for years, been watching it all month, waiting for it to get that color. I was happy to share that with you. So thank you very much for watching. Talk to you soon. Bye.